Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. I'm going to talk about some crazy stuff. Okay, here's a story. I got to tell it to you. It just kind of landed on me as sort of funny, but it's the kind of things that can happen to you when you don't plan to do something, but you get yourself in a situation. Okay, here's the deal. This guy was kind of seeing this girl and they were young, they were teenagers, and, the romantic thing was, it was hit or miss. So it seemed like this particular evening, he was trying to be more friends than an intimate partner. So, they did a little bit of necking, kissing, whatever, but then he decided, okay, I don't want to have any part of this. And the guy tried to leave. Well, when the guy went to leave, the girl locks the deadbolt on the front door so he can't leave out of the house. Well, him noticing, and when I say lock the deadbolt, it's the kind that has the key in it. So the guy recognizes right away, look, I don't want to do too much here because if she snatches the key out, then I'm locked in the house. I mean, you kind of say, well, why didn't he just run out the back door? Well, out the back door was to the backyard. There was a dog back there, and dog see you, dog chews your leg off, and boy, that's no fun. So what he does is that he goes into the room and pretends like he's really going to get into some heavy petting or something. And what he does is that this is one of those things where he was skillful enough at least to get her interested in, being the focus. So he let her be the focus, kind of got the clothes off of her, at least didn't take everything off, but he just took off just enough so that when she tried to put them on, it would at least delay her long enough so that when he decided to run out of the house, she wouldn't be able to catch up to him. So that's, in fact, how he was able to get away. He distracted her by focusing on her, getting her all warmed up and had the clothes kind of part way off of her. So when he bolted for the door, because remember, he had to unlock it to get out, she didn't quite have enough time to get herself together to be able to catch him, and he made it out the door. Now, obviously, she was a little upset by the situation, but what I can tell you is that, there was no intercourse or anything like that went on, but, that was a crazy story. But, I believe that happened, just the way I told it to you. Simply being in a situation where you don't want to be with somebody can really make you think of some wild and crazy things to get out of that. And that's kind of how that situation was. The fact that she would lock him in the house if he didn't want to be there. That was kind of funny to begin with, but then kind of scary too. Think about that. You get in a situation with someone and, you don't necessarily know where it's going to go, but you just kind of think, it's pretty neutral. Yeah, it's pretty safe. And, I would say at one time the two had been intimate, but thinking about it further, the guy decided, well, I don't think I want to go any further with this. And she didn't want to take no for an answer. Therefore, the situation came up and he had to be kind of clever about it because, like I said, that door had a key in it to lock the deadbolt. And you got to figure if that woman takes the key out, then he's sort of stuck. And who knows what he would have had to have done to get out of that situation. But lo and behold, he got out of it, and he lived another day to be able to tell this story and share it. So, as a guy thinking about that, I don't know too many guys that have been in that situation, but I can imagine well, I say it this way. I can only imagine what it would be like, simply because when you don't imagine being in a situation like that, you don't prepare for it. I mean, you're just there. So as, time went on, what does that teach you? If you be cool and calm in situations like that and don't necessarily give out your escape plan, then you can probably make your way out of that. So anyhow, that's the crazy thing that happened. And it gives me a moment to pause and reflect on something here. And it's the kinds of situations we get ourselves into with people, and we don't necessarily think it through. And I mean, in this particular case, these are a couple of teenagers, and, they don't have any experience in life. So the kind of stuff that they get themselves into usually is something stupid like that or crazy, and they learn from it. So I would hope that if you're a little older than, these teenagers were when these kinds of situations are happening, you're not finding yourself in these kinds of experiences. Because if you are, you really need to take a step back and think about the kind of people you're bringing into your life. I mean, obviously, we're living in a day and age where, people have to be very careful about who they are involved with sexually. And, as we're older, emotionally, we've evolved, and we tend to be a bit better, a bit wiser about things. At least we would expect that, because we certainly expect that of other people. So I'm going to ask you to remember to look in the mirror. If you're spending time with somebody who's potentially put you in a situation like I was just talking about, wow, that could be something that could have some consequences that we definitely don't want to be dealing with. So that's just a word of caution. There's no shame here. We learn from stuff like that, and certainly thinking about it.
All of our shows from the
putting
GSMC
myself in that
podcast
situation,
network,
I think
from
about,
sex
wow,
and relationships
sometimes that
to
stuff
health
can
and
get pretty
wellness,
scary, and it can
life and happiness,
happen
and
awfully
even
fast.
weird
And,
news.
if
You
it
can
were
also
a
follow
young
us
lady
on Twitter and
who,
Facebook.
say,
Thank you, and we
gets
hope you have
with
enjoyed
some
today's episode
overbearing,
of the Golden State
creepy
Media
kind of guy,
Concepts
I can
Sex
imagine
Podcast.
how scary that could be, because you feel trapped. I'm just going to leave that there. So I'm going to transition into something. I discovered a video last night that sort of explains something called prostate massage. Now the prostate, for those of you who don't know, is a gland that is near the bladder of a man. It's below the bladder. And what it does is it creates seminal fluid. And that seminal fluid is what supports the semen when there's an ejaculation. And because of the man's plumbing, usually during the act of having sex, when there's an ejaculation, the seminal fluid and the sperm, which comes from the testes and it travels through the epididymis into the urethra and then comes out, all of these things come together. But the prostate in and of itself is a gland, and as men tend to age, sometimes that gland will grow and expand, and it causes issues for men when having to urinate a lot, sometimes during the night. And there's medications for that. There's things that they can do. And it's also a gland that for some men becomes cancerous. So it's one of those things that men need to educate themselves about. So, and the idea of prostate massage, so let me explain it this way. It is when there is inflammation, the idea that it can be massaged to help relieve the inflammation, to help relax the gland, is something that's been discussed. I'm not an expert about it. I've never had this, but I stumbled across the videos on YouTube. You can YouTube prostate massage or prostatitis or something like that, and it will come up for you. You may see something of interest to you. So what I watched was a discussion, or at least a presentation by a couple. They were relatively young. And the thing about the prostate, so let me explain this to you if you don't know where it is or much more about it. The prostate, when a doctor is giving an exam for a man on his prostate, he has to enter through the rectum. So that is a digital exam. He puts on a glove, he lubes it up really well, and then he reaches through the man's anus and then feels for the prostate to determine if he thinks that there is some inflammation, and if there is, he can prescribe a medication for it. I need to take a quick break, and I'm going to come back and delve into this a little bit more. So stay tuned.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And we're back. As I was saying, when a doctor does an examination, they put on the glove, they lube it up, and they check the prostate for its condition. So something to understand about this particular organ as well is that there is some stimulation when, not in this particular occasion when the doctor's doing an exam, but in more of a situation where you are with your partner and you're feeling, that intimacy vibe going on, that when a man's prostate is stimulated, there is a lot of sensations with that, a lot of sexual sensations. And I know that for some people, definitely it sort of crosses the line for some guys to have a finger inserted into the rectum because that is the exam thing and they're worried about being perceived as gay or homosexual or something. But when we're talking about it from the standpoint of this, and this is the sex show, and I try to educate people, get it back away from that, because this doesn't make you gay if that is something that you are opposed to. And this is no slam on anybody's sexual preference or anything. But for those men who have never had a prostate massage or have never had the experience of being stimulated that way, then this might be something that would take your sexual experience to another level. And what it is to have it massaged and it's from what I have gathered through the presentation from the couple, was the experience is a different kind of orgasm. And for that reason, it is something to be, to try it out. Obviously, having a partner who would perform this on you, there's got to be a lot of trust. There's got to be a lot of, discussion about how you want this to proceed. And so I'm going to describe it this way. The conversation based on what the couple was sharing is that there needs to be a lot of lubrication and you got to take it slow. Just like in any sort of new sexual experience between partners, you take things slow and, relax. And if it's going the way you want it and it's feeling good, then you can proceed. If things seem a little uncomfortable, then, you have either, you can say no or have a safe word or something like that. And therefore, it doesn't become a bad or traumatic kind of experience. But like I said, when it came to this couple describing the relationship, the guy obviously had a lot to say and really appreciated the enthusiasm that his partner shared, because this was something that she wanted to do for him, with him. And, he took great pride in being able to express not only the quality of his orgasm, but the vulnerability in being in that place with her and trusting her. So it just goes without saying that you obviously have to be with somebody that you have a lot of trust with, because as you're experimenting with something like this, when things aren't going as, say, I guess planned is the word that I'm going to use here, then you want to be able to pull back from that and still have, the relationship, so something that you can, turn to that's a little more familiar. And that would help make the experience a lot more comfortable and not have any qualms about it. So again, the discussion about the orgasm, at least the quality of it, is that it is a totally different type of orgasm. And the ejaculation, it's different for a man from that perspective. It sort of is much slower, much easier. It's sort of like just a wave that sort of comes over you, and that's it. But I'm passing on the information. Like I said, you can hit that YouTube button and look for prostate massage. I'm sure there's a lot of choices there. And there's the discussions about things that you probably have never even thought about. I mean, this one was a new one for me. My experience with this basically is with my doctor and having, being a guy, you get checked because, well, you don't want to have that experience of having prostate cancer. And for guys, that's something that's, for the most part, is treatable. And if you catch it early enough, then there's something that they can do about it. Cancer being what it is, can be devastating. And usually the more time you have in meaning in early detection, then the better your outcome, the better chances for having an outcome that leads to a longer and quality of life. So for the guys that are listening, if you've never had your prostate checked, get it done. It's a doctor. He's checking for you, and he's going to give you whatever bill of health comes from the examination, and you're going to want to know this thing. I mean, think about it. Women get vaginal exams all the time. So it's a man thing. It's something that you have to learn to deal with, especially as you get older. And that's something you want the information on. There are many places that you can get information about, the guidelines and how often you should get checked. But as men age, that is something they really need to take into consideration. And if you're feeling any symptoms of, say, you need to urinate several times at night, maybe you're having some pain in your perineum, and the perineum is the area between your anus and your scrotum. So the prostate sort of rests somewhere a little further up, but there's a lot of nerve endings in that area. And if you're having pain in that area, it might be indicative of something that's going on for you. And that is why you would want to get an exam. Don't put it off, because it is something that is treatable. There are lots of medications. So if you have an issue with your prostate, now this is some of the stuff I need to tell you this. If you're having an issue with your prostate, there are medications that are out there. Now, medications do have side effects, and for some people, they don't like the side effects. So then you have to learn to educate yourself on things that might be a little more natural that could work with you. But to say it, if you are having erectile problems, your prostate could be part of the issue. And if you're having a problem with, say, maybe having a good or strong orgasm, and knowing that if that area, that perineum, gets massaged during a sexual experience, then sometimes it's a very powerful orgasm. But if things seem to be tapering off in terms of their intensity, hey, you may have an issue with your prostate. So get it checked. It's something that can be done. And like I said, when it's done, then at least you can put it behind you. No pun intended. And ladies, if you are experiencing something with your man that I've discussed, like I said, the difficulty urinating, or the frequency of having to go to the bathroom at night, or maybe even the difficulty with an erection that doesn't seem to have some other kinds of causes, or maybe some pain in the area, you might talk to your guy about these things that I've been discussing here, just to at least open the conversation and then steer them into the direction of the family physician or urologist, because they are the experts in dealing with these kinds of things. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back after this.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships. Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. And I've been talking about some crazy stuff. What gives your sex the better edge? Is it porn? Is it crazy costumes? What is it? How about books? Have you ever thought about that? You and your partner share some intimate time by reading a book together. You know, you can read, you can take turns reading from the book, or if you're into paperbacks, or if you do the electronic device, you know, you can either each have one, or you can share the same one. Yeah, that seems like intimate. You know, you can kind of read to each other, that sort of way. But the idea behind this is that you are focusing on each other. You know, one of the things that people have a challenge doing, couples have a challenge doing, is finding time to be intimate with each other. So there are lots of ways in which we do this. Sometimes we have to plan a vacation just to be able to have intimate time together where we're not distracted by all the things that are going on. And if you have kids, then, you know, the kids are obviously a full-time job, and you may not even get much time to yourself, let alone to be able to spend time with your partner that's one-on-one. So again, scheduling is usually one of those things that works. But absent that opportunity to do it when you would like, sometimes just powering down, you can kind of sneak this idea in. As you're relaxing, some people like to read a book to relax. How about taking a moment from time to time to share something with your partner? A book that you both might have some interest in, maybe something that kind of gets the juices going. But with that, we're creating an environment where the two of you have each other as the focus. It's not always going to be sexual, but at least having that time together is intimacy. And you never know where it might go. You get in the habit of doing that, then you will regularly set aside time for things like that. And even you could borrow this when you go on a vacation. You know, you're out doing your regular routine, but it's, again, the idea is about having each other as the focus. One of the things that happens when you're being sexual with each other is obviously there's the intimacy because you're being close, because you're having sex. But does it feel like you are a priority with your partner when you're being intimate? I mean, that might sound a little strange to ask it that way, but some people will be intimate with their partner because it's fulfilling their partner's need. But what about yourself? Are your needs being met when you are giving of yourself that way because you want your partner to know that you think they're important? You know, this thing sort of meanders because we oftentimes will sacrifice for our lover because we want their needs to be met. And by doing that, we are showing our love that way. That's an act of service. There's several ways in which we show our love. There are acts of service, words of kindness, gifts. And I'm forgetting the other two at the moment, but there are several. And that's one way in which we do that for our partner. And men do that as well as women. The idea that, it's only women that really sacrifice themselves in the relationship should be, put aside to consider that there are lots of men who are very loving and very dedicated to their partners and understand the give and take nature of a relationship, emotional and sexual and otherwise. So while it might seem very interesting that, a man would just decide to be intimate with his girlfriend or wife just to please her. Well, yeah, because it isn't always about penetration. It isn't always about the sexual intercourse. I mean, it could be oral sex. It could be a massage. There could be lots of other ways in which the intimacy happens. And, I say, give it up for your partner. That's a great way to show love. But as I had started out by talking about in using the books as an opportunity to have intimate time that isn't necessarily physically sexual, because when you're being sexual, especially in a physical sense where there's thrusting and your partners are changing positions, a lot of times people don't get involved in that, at least late, because it's so much energy required to do that. So what can we substitute? Here we go. Maybe a book. That time spent being with each other where it's quiet and we don't necessarily have to talk about anything in particular other than what we have, the words that we're reading. Get the idea? You see, that was borrowed from a relationship. It was borrowed from some advice given to me by someone who'd been in a relationship for many, 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 many years. And you learn to transition so many different things when you've been with somebody a long time. And you try to think of ways to keep it fresh. And a lot of times what we think of, especially if you're, really physically thinking, what we think of keeping it fresh is we think about having sex in different positions and in different places. And sometimes you really have to think about, it's not about the physical act. It's really about the emotion. And when you've got that part mastered, it seems like the rest comes a little easier. That's just food for thought. And now I want to close it out with this little tidbit of information, and it is the age-old question, does size matter? And you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the male member. We're talking about the junk, that whole thing. Of the women that I have asked, the answer has been, it depends. Now, let me explain something as to why that would be an answer. It would appear that women who are smaller in stature do not necessarily need a guy who is huge, at least to feel some sort of stimulation. A woman who seems to be a little bit larger in physical structure seems like she might need more in terms of penetration. But there is a caveat to all of this. When we're talking about what stimulates a woman sexually, and we're talking stimulation of the clitoris, well, does that really depend on size? And the answer from the women was that no, that depended more on technique. So that answers the question of size. It's more about knowledge in those particular cases. Now, as men, we tend to feel like we get more interest in being sexual when we penetrate and can feel something in terms of snugness around our member. And women have expressed a certain amount of satisfaction with being able to feel that. But there and again, it's technique. If you're fairly well endowed and you are, say, there's a size difference between the woman. Let's say the woman is fairly petite and the guy is fairly large. What are the possibilities there? Well, you're going to have to learn to be gentle and work with that, because if you're too aggressive, then it's going to hurt and the woman's not going to like it. And being a large guy means, well, size does matter. If you're large, she's not going to like it. Well, there you go. That's a random sample. It's simply that. Take it for what you will. I'll add more to this when there's more to share. So, I want to thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, the Sex Edition, and I've been talking about the crazy stuff. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.